my name is Didier Morelli. I'm a visual and performance artist. My practice is mainly performance-based, but it's also quite interdisciplinary. I carry sort of performance elements into print media installation, and also drawing and mark making and video. Basically anything I can get my hands on and that I can get like a basic understanding of is a medium I'm interested in using. But kind of what unifies it is themes of sort of moving bodies and space and relationship between moving bodies and space and archives and history, art history, but also more general history. My partner and I were presenting a paper on marching bands and HBCUs, historically black colleges in the United States, and the sort of relationship between that and like visual artists and architects and performing artists, and how they'd been used and coexisted. And it was a panel on sports and art. And after the panel, Emily, the director of the Owens Art Gallery, was there and came up to me and she said, you know, I have this Colville painting, and it's called Athletes. And I've been trying to think of a way to like recontextualize it or reframe it or re-engage it. Would you be interested? And so the conversation started from there, and we moved forward. And what happened afterwards is basically that I came to the Owens and did some research at Mount A. Did some research on the history of Athletes, the painting, but also on the history of Mount A and its relationship to sort of sports and athletics and how important that was. And then basically from that, I then developed a project that was, a combination of all the things that I do. So I use the archival material to sort of reframe it and create a new sort of assemblage or collage. You can kind of see to my right here in the frame the pennants, which are the university pennants, which I have now sort of collaged into this critical mass. And then a series of prints that were made from an image of Alex Colville standing in front of the painting at the inauguration in 1961 of the Athletic Center. And then there's some sculptural elements that are just more elements of sports and art and sort of anecdotes that were passed on by either preparators at the gallery or archivists who were sort of telling me stories as to about the painting and moving the painting and trying to get the painting to different places, or about Colville and the history of the gallery and so on. So those elements have sort of introduced themselves into the show too. And then I'd say the last element is the presence of Eunice, Bélidor, and Camille, Georgeson-Usher, who I asked to contribute to texts for the exhibition. And they're texts that sort of look at very broadly the intersection between visual arts and sports. So the part of the objects that I brought and that have contributed to the archive, if we think about the archive as a porous thing that I'm now like intervening in physically by adding objects, are to my left here there is a series of baseball bats. And those are from a performance that I did at the Museum of Contemporary Art a couple of months ago in November. They're actually blemished bats, so they are not to be used for playing. They've sort of been discarded, and there's this really nice thing about each one of them where you look for what the blemish is in them, and you look for what the reason that they've been discarded, whether it's aesthetic or physical. So they are sort of assembled at a critical mass, and then one of them has been transformed into basically an instrument. So using a contact microphone wrapped around it, tied to a small Marshall amp that's battery powered, I've turned that object into essentially a sounding device. So everything that touches that object, whether it be my hands running around it or dragging it on the floor or hitting at something, becomes emitted and amplified through the intermediary of the microphone. So that's sort of one of the elements. And then above that, I've combined it with 30 years of sports medals. When I was thinking about the show, I was thinking about my own relationship to sports and growing up and 30 years of it and my body being not what it was and moving and aging. And I thought, I have this critical mass of I think it's 52 medals from like running and track and field, triathlon, soccer mostly, and whatever. And so I brought them all, and then I've dipped them into two colors of paint, which I'm referencing throughout, which are pulled out from the Colville original. So for me, it's a bit of a giving up and giving over gesture of like letting these medals go towards something and towards the piece. And then the other elements in the space that I brought, there's some popcorn bags that have been interspersed with peanuts. The packing peanuts are actually a reference to an action done by a college professor who was also a provost at a certain point, who pushed a peanut along, after losing a bet, pushed a peanut along the floor of the athletic center with his nose. And when I found that in the archives, I thought, oh my God, this is like a performance piece in the 1940s. Like, there was a performance artist here who was making work, you know, even though this was this joke. And so I became a bit obsessed with that. So that's one of the references, and that's one, that image is in one of the cases. I think about archives in history and material histories, but also like legacies and icons and art histories as very malleable and things that can be played with and accessed in different ways. One of the things, the pleasures of this project has been to think outside of that box and to think outside of this kind of like this image that we have of sports and art as being this like the exceptional being and whatever, the white body in like, you know, or the perfect body in action. It's much more than that. And sports and art can be explored in so many different ways, even as a spectator or as someone who enjoys jogging or just going for a walk or whatever. Like, this is an ongoing process, and this exhibition is an iteration of a moving idea that will just keep accumulating as I move forward to this idea of sports and art. And I'll be dragging the baseball bats out of here, but probably other elements of it forward into other research projects than